never had remote learning, at least for I think K through 8. Here in Florida, we've been in all year in person. Parents have the option if they choose to do virtual, they're allowed to do it, but everyone is offered in person. Other states like Georgia have also done a lot. But yet we have some states in this country where you have virtually no access to in-person education, California being one of them. I know Maryland and some of these other ones. So we've now been doing this for a year. Is there any basis to keep kids locked out of school? Jay?
We should open every school in the United States immediately with no restrictions. What we're doing to children is robbing them of their birthright.
There's absolutely no public health reasons to prevent children from going to school in person. It's not dangerous for children to be in school, and it's not dangerous for teachers either. And the only exception is that if you're a teacher and you're above 60, maybe you should be allowed to do online teaching until you have the vaccine. But other than that, there's no reason to do that. We knew that already in the summer because of what happened in Sweden during the spring. During the height of the epidemic, the schools were open. Out of 1.8 million children ages 1 to 15 who were all in school or daycare, there were exactly 0 deaths among children. The teachers had lower risk than the average of other professions. So, was necessary. I mean, if a child is sick, has a runny nose or cough or fever, that's good for them to stay home. But in Sweden, there was no social distancing in the schools, and there was no masks in the schools. And despite that, it was perfectly safe for both children and teachers.
Dr. Gupta, kids in school?
Oh, I mean, to me, this is the most heartbreaking element of what's happened. And I think that, I mean, there's evidence that schools don't, I mean, which has just been discussed, that they don't really contribute that much to transmission. Children are safe, which is important. Teachers are safe, et cetera, but even if schools were a kind of locus for the dissemination of infection, I think we should have gone down the route of focused protection and still kept the schools open. I don't see how, as human beings, we're morally responsible to keep schools open, to provide the children with that atmosphere, with the opportunities of education. Also, for underprivileged children, it's actually a lifeline. So to withdraw those things from children is really unconscionable, given that we could have protected those who are vulnerable, even if the schools, I'd say, happen to be a place from which the virus was able to disseminate. So I cannot even begin to comprehend what kind of mindset would inflict what we've inflicted on the children. And even by letting them in now to force them to wear masks and distance socially, all of that to me is in direct violation of our social contract.
Scott, I know you came here with us over the summer, and we obviously had embarked on opening schools. That was actually very controversial at the time, even though the data really wasn't in dispute, I don't think, but I think it was just a political issue. And you were very clear, kids needed to be in school.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything that's been said. It is really unconscionable that there are any schools that are not in person. And, this data is not new. This is not something we've learned. This was data that we knew in the spring. In the late spring, the data was in all over the world. It's been validated, of course, since then. It's been validated by studies at places like Duke in the United States, Brown University, but all over the world, all over Europe, and including even here in Florida. The reality is that the kids have extremely low risk from COVID-19. There are enormous harms from keeping in-person schools closed, and there's nothing more important to the United States or any country than educating our children. It happens to be icing on the cake, as we say, that children are not significant spreaders to adults, but that's really just icing on the cake. The numbers 1 through 3 that I just said meant schools must be open in person. When we see what happened with schools being closed, in-person schools. It wasn't just that long-distance learning is a failure. As Sunetra alluded to here, simply the socialization kids learn in school. There were hundreds of thousands of child abuse cases not reported in the United States just during the spring school closures, because schools are the #1 agency where child abuse is noted. There's nutritional needs. All kinds of things happened, and all of these things, as we know, with everything else in the lockdown, are worse for lower income and middle income working class people. You know, it's easy to sit there in your sort of second house, whether it's in Palm Beach or in the Hamptons, and say that, wow, it's hard because your children are underfoot. But the brunt of the lockdown harms, including to children, were much worse felt by lower income families.
And I think it's been well documented, the academic problems that the virtual learning, there's a gap that develops for sure. But I can tell you, I think even more important than that, when I talk to parents, they will all say, my kids are happy to be back in school. I have a sister in a lockdown state where the kids aren't, and the kids are miserable in wherever state. And here my kids are happy. They're able to do activities and everything. So I think that these prolonged school closures are going to have massive effects for our society in places that have had, and some of the places have had the schools closed for a year. They're not going back this spring at this point. I mean, we know that. That's just not going to happen. So then you're looking at the fall, and then they're now saying, well, maybe not until they have to have all the kids vaccinated too, which these vaccines aren't even approved for kids. So it's conceivable you don't have some states until 2022 even, which is just absolutely unbelievable. Dr. Gupta mentioned about, not putting masks on kids. That's not effective, not necessary. Martin Kulldorff, do you agree in school there's no need for them to be wearing face masks?
Children should not wear face masks, no. They don't need it for their own protection, and they don't need it for protecting other people either.
Jay?